evening, everyone, and welcome to our Labor Day Monday edition of Track Announcer's Notebook. We've got Ben Young, who will be spending the biggest portion of the hour with, talking about his Canadian Tire Motorsport Park weekend, but also looking ahead to the final two CSBK Superbike races that will be run on Saturday, September the 18th. And we also have former Superbike champion in the modern era, but decades before Ben Young, Mike MacNeil, who's continued on racing vintage Superbikes with the VRRA, but also getting behind the wheel of a F4 Formula 4 race car. Had the chance to announce a couple of his races last summer at Shannonville Motorsport Park. So we'll get into all of that. Mike will help us recap the big VRRA that just wrapped up yesterday. But as always, up first, Nodell's notes, and my co-host and producer of the show, Stuart Nodell.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. I hope you had a great weekend at CTMP. I know you were announcing the car races. And just a quick update, during SOAR's last regional round last weekend, Kelly Holmes, who really spearheaded a raffle to benefit Mike and his family, raised an additional $11,415. So that's really great news that the motorcycling community's really gotten behind Mike and his family, and hopefully he continues to progress. And also I've noticed Kelly has posted, for those that haven't claimed their prizes, you have till this Thursday to do so. Otherwise, they're going to have another raffle this weekend.
Yeah, and I'm sure the whole SOAR racing community, they've got events coming up in September and as well in October that they'll continue their fundraising efforts. But the news on Mike Grass has been encouraging, and I know James Pletch is on our show tonight as one of the attendees. And James, if you do have any further update on how Mike is doing, please pass it along in the Q&A, and Stuart will share that with everybody who's on the show tonight.
And this past weekend, Pat, World Superbike was back at it with at Magny-Cours in France, and Toprak, the Yamaha factory rider, he actually won all three races with the Super Pole, but he did exceed the track limit, so he was penalized one position, but he did double up both race wins over Johnny Ray.
And it does look as though Ray is in danger of losing his string of consecutive World Superbike championships, which I think sits at 6. And Raz Gataloglu, I believe, is the correct pronunciation. We've been working a few weeks on that, Stuart, so we've got it all sorted out for when World Superbike comes back to Canada and I get to announce the race.
That's right. That'll be the real pressure. And then you can see here's the overall standings, where they stand going into the next round. That's going to be at Catalunya in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and right now, realistically, pretty much a Kawasaki Yamaha battle for the championship, 7 points apart. And wouldn't be surprised if it goes right down to the final World Superbike round.
And then they are racing next, or in 2 weeks, or the same weekend as the final CSBK round at Catalunya in Spain. Then I found this article, or this information, late last week, Pat, and thought it was fitting since we're having a vintage rider on this evening, and we are going to look back at the VRRA at Shannonville. There is rumors that ARMA is going to be heading back to Daytona, possibly in January, or maybe part of Bike Week.
Well, of course, ARMA does have a true national vintage program, ran as part of Daytona Bike Week for many, many years. Their races, I think, originally used to run on Wednesday, and I can remember Richard Chambers and I announcing from the back of a pickup truck that they had parked in the infield when they ran a revised, didn't run the full track. They would run an infield section in the west banking, really a neat layout, and I think perfectly suited for vintage racing. They haven't been part of the Daytona race schedule during Bike Week in March for a few years, but I think this is really, really good news where they're looking to kick off their season at Daytona and then wrap it up at Barber as they will on what is our Thanksgiving weekend in early October. So there's some new management there, some new people in ARM, and I think they've been doing a great job of putting together their series. And I think this is great news that they're going to be able to get back to Daytona.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll see borders open up so that guys like Mike MacNeil can go and take a crack at some of these Americans, and because he and Dean have quite a superbike program here in Canada. Then the American Flat Track was doing the Springfield Mile, their classic Labor Day event, Pat.
And Jared Mees, I think he ended up pulling off the double, taking the win over Briar Bauman. I think you've got the updated points. If you don't, I know things have really tightened up there. You see just 12 points now with those 2 wins on the weekend by Jared Mees. He's close to within 12 points. Brandon Robinson a little bit further back. So at the moment, it's a 3-rider race, but Mees really making a big push to try to win another American Flat Track Championship.
And then they're up next weekend is the Sacramento Mile, and they're also having a vintage type of event where they're bringing back some of the legends like Dave Aldana and such to participate. So that should be a fun one to check in on.
Yeah, and I think that'll bring out a huge crowd. A lot of the old flat track fans get a chance to see their heroes back on the racetrack. And in terms of flat track racing here in Canada, this past Saturday night they were scheduled to run a national at Thetford Mines, but due to the requirement, and I think it is a fairly recent one, that all participants have a COVID passport guaranteeing they've had both vaccinations. I think that created a bit of a logistical issue, and American Flat Track and the local promoter were forced to cancel that event. So on next week's show, we'll try to get an update as to what the status is of the American or the Flat Track Canada series. I know they've had a couple of events, but I think some of their other races, we'll try to get the status on those. They are scheduled to run at Shannonville on the oval down there at the end of September, and we'll get an update as to where that stands.
And thanks, Pat. James Pletch did put in the Q&A that Mike Grass was able to speak a few words late last week. So again, more encouraging news from the Mike Grass front.
Yeah, that's really encouraging news. I know it's a long road back for Mike, as it was for Jeff Williams. And as you know, Jeff is pretty much made a full recovery. I mean, there's still maybe some nagging issues with him, but hopefully Mike Grass is on that same road to recovery that we saw with Jeff Williams.
Yeah, although Jeff Williams, he's trying to be the latest version of Mike MacNeil. I know he's got his car racing license in that truck. I was speaking to his father, Jerry, at CTMP. So we'll see if Jeff starts racing cars actively in the near future.
Yeah, well, I've announced Mike's motorcycle and car races. We'll see whether I get a chance to do that with Jeff Williams.
And then just one of our featured guests here. This was a cool picture I saw posted from the VRRA at Shannonville. And this is the front row of the P3 race.
All right, Mike.
That's it, Pat.
Okay, Mike, do you want to jump in now and tell us, first of all, a little bit about the overall VRRA weekend, because the first half of the season got canceled due to COVID, including the opening round that's always held at Shannonville. The Quinty TT, that was canceled. The event at Calabogie was canceled. Luckily, you guys were able to get in the August event, the Vintage Festival at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, where you won the Period 3 Heavyweight Superbike race. And then at Shannonville this weekend, I don't think you won the race, but finished high enough to wrap up the championship. First of all, how was the overall weekend? And tell us a little bit more about that Period 3 Superbike championship you won.
The weekend was great. Next to Sunday, the weather wasn't too good, but I didn't go on the Friday. I just showed up for the Saturday. But Saturday was good. Um, you know, we had a good race. I mean, Scott was close, Scott McVicker, but we did win the. I don't know. They say it's not a qualifier, but we're used to Saturdays always being qualifiers. So we were lucky enough to win that one, get another track record. Um, but Sunday was a little bit of a different story. So they had done the math, and they said to win the championship, I needed 1 point, which I said, okay. And unfortunately, they delayed the race for about 10 minutes. And next thing you know, the rain came. Scott McVicker had rains on, we had slicks. So I said, I'm not going to go if it rains because I'm just a fair weather rider nowadays. So they went out, they did one lap, they red flagged the race. So they did a total restart. They talked me into it. I went out in the rain with the slicks on. There was only a handful of guys there. So either way, all I had to do was catch the flag and I got some points and I could win the championship for them. So that's what I did. Right.
Right.
But it was not the way I would have preferred to do it. I mean, at least I was out on the track, I guess. But yeah, but the VRA has been good. You know, I can't complain. It's a lot of fun. Most of the people are really good. So there's no issues with them, that's for sure. I'm glad that they have what they have. And so unfortunately, we weren't able to race a full season this year. Last year was the same. I think we only were able to get in one weekend, the last Shannonville. But hopefully, you know, next year will be better.
Yeah. Well, hopefully next year, I think for all of us, whether it's VRRA or CSBK, we're hoping to have a full season that's going to start in May and go at least up till September. Mike, what about the bike that you're riding? Is it the same one I saw you on at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, the Ben Gardner machine, or who actually owns the bike?
So the actual owner is Dean Rustin. Ben has done the work on it. So the last 2 years, the bike's basically been almost a good street motor, 1100 motor. So they souped up the motor, shall we say, for this year. And we broke it in at a Shannonville round, and then we brought it to Mossport. And it's on these old bikes, you put in an extra 20 horsepower. That's huge. And the bike's been really good. Dean's been awesome. Ben's tuned it. No complaints with the bike now, but unfortunately you get into a few different issues with it, with handling and whatnot. You start getting the horsepower in. I remember Colin Duncan at the round at Mossport. I led for the P4 race, P4 F1 race at the beginning. And then they went around on the outside of me on 3. I mean, their bikes are on rails. They're newer bikes, the P4 bikes. And he said to me, he goes, I was just hoping you weren't going to crash into me because of the way it was sliding and hobbling. But that's the way some of these bikes are back then.
Yeah, bit of a bunking Bronco.
Yeah.
Modern super bikes are a whole lot better, as Ben Young will attest to. Michael, what about the car racing stuff that you've been doing? Do you have any more races this year? And what's the difference in terms of your mental approach getting in that F4 car, which I think was powered by a Suzuki GSXR 750 motor?
Yeah, I mean, the cars are great fun too. And you know what? Coming from a bike, you feel like you're so safe in the cars. And the car's been great. The only problem with the cars is they are definitely a time vampire. But otherwise, you know, it's the competition and whatnot. And unfortunately, I was out in Calabogie 2 weeks ago, and I was going for the lead, and I went on the outside of the corner a bit, and unfortunately, I touched the grass with one wheel. And when you're on the brakes and you touch the grass, you're going for a spin. So I just kissed the guardrail, and I have a little bit of damage to the rear rim and the upright. But I should have all the parts in this week and repair it. It wasn't too much damage. But no, there's 2 more races, one basically the middle of September and one October 1st and 2nd, I believe.
All right.
And that'll be it.
Canadian Tire Motorsport Park.
Yes, both of them. Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's the BEMC late summer trophy races, where there's a Formula 4 class, and then the celebration of motorsport in early October.
Yes.
So that's where we can see you in the F4 car, as opposed to on the Dean Rushton Superbike.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the bikes are great. I mean, I took, what, 15 years off, and then I came back to it. I mean, I had an offer. It was funny the way that happened, because I ended up getting a street bike. Ben kind of seen this bike, and he goes, "Oh, so I get it. It's a YZF 750." And, you know, I thought, I'm mature enough now to drive on the road. I was, you know, 55 years old. So, and then, but I hated it. So I took it to a couple track days, and I told Ben, I said, you know, I still think I can do this. In other words, race, right? And that's how that all transpired. Dean didn't want to race anymore. He let me on his bike, and it just went from there. So that way it's been great. And those guys have been phenomenal. You know, I'm like a full-blown professional road racer there in that pit. So I can't complain. And there's been a number of people that have been very good. Joe Starkaskis, when I was racing the 250s in the 90s, he was there. And then when we switched to shifter carts, he came with me again. And then when I started doing the F4 cars, he came with me again. So I've been lucky to have some really good people help me out, which has made it so much easier.
Yeah, indeed. Every top rider needs to have that team behind them. Michael, we've got lots to talk to Ben Young about. You sort of, I think you would admit, sort of played the conservative game there on the weekend and won your championship, backing into that title. I don't think Ben Young is going to be able to do that. He is in for a real battle for this championship. We'll get to that. Michael, do you follow the modern superbikes? Do you follow the CSBK series?
Oh yeah, how can you not? A good true bike racer for sure will be still following it. I mean, it was hard to watch the first few years. That took a while, but no, I definitely follow it.
All right, Michael.
Sorry, Ben will know me, but I definitely know him.
All right. Okay, Mike, always good to call your motorcycle or car races. And as we said, Jeff Williams may be the next guy where I've announced both their car and their motorcycle races. All the best. And hopefully next season you're running a full VRRA schedule, and maybe you and Ben and Dean can take that superbike down to Arma and run a few races down there, including that opener at Daytona in January, assuming the border is going to be open.
Mm-hmm. They would love that, I'm sure. They've talked about that, but we'll see. I mean, you know, that's the only problem. I mean, I'm not getting any younger, and, you know, Humpty Dumpty, when he falls, he breaks. We don't want to fall anymore.
All right. Okay, Mike, good seeing you again. And feel free to stick around for the rest of the show if you'd like. But right